Travel along, Catholic pilgrims, for 1 year as we read through St. Faustina's diary. Join me, Amy Thomas, each day for a short reading out of the diary which brought us a deeper understanding of Christ's divine mercy. Welcome, Catholic pilgrims, to day 353 of our readings from St. Faustina's diary. So we are on the third day of this mini retreat that Christ has asked Sister Faustina to go into with him. And today he's going to talk a lot about love of neighbor and how we should sacrifice for neighbors, how we should pray for neighbors. And I was just reflecting back on all of the actual neighbors I've had throughout my life. I know when Christ talks about neighbors, he literally means it can be anybody. But I was just, thinking about all of the neighbors that I've had. I have lived in a lot of places, especially as a military spouse, and I've had some great neighbors and I've had some bad neighbors, but they are all a part of the makeup of our lives, and we are called to enter into a relationship with them in some capacity. And some neighbors are so bad that you really can't do that, and so about the best you can do is to pray for them. But they really are woven into the fabric of our lives. And I'm sure if you start to think about all the neighbors that you've had throughout your life, you're going to have a lot of people come to the front of your mind. So that's what we're going to talk about today in Notebook 6, numbers 1767 through 1773. Conference on Sacrifice and Prayer. My daughter, I want to instruct you on how you are to rescue souls through sacrifice and prayer. You will save more souls through prayer and suffering than will a missionary through his teachings and sermons alone. I want to see you as a sacrifice of living love, which only then carries weight before me. You must be annihilated, destroyed, living as if you were dead in the most secret depths of your being. You must be destroyed in that secret depth where the human eye has never penetrated. Then will I find in you a pleasing sacrifice, a holocaust full of sweetness and fragrance. And great will be your power for whomever you intercede. Outwardly, your sacrifice must look like this: silent, hidden, permeated with love, imbued with prayer. I demand, my daughter, that your sacrifice be pure and full of humility, that I may find pleasure in it. I will not spare my grace, that you may be able to fulfill what I demand of you. I will now instruct you on what your holocaust shall consist of in everyday life, so as to preserve you from illusions. You shall accept all sufferings with love. Do not be afflicted if your heart often experiences repugnance and dislike for sacrifice. All its power rests in the will, and so these contrary feelings, far from lowering the value of the sacrifice in my eyes, will enhance it. Know that your body and soul will often be in the midst of fire. Although you will not feel my presence, on some occasions I will always be with you. Do not fear. My grace will be with you. Third day. My daughter, in this meditation, consider the love of neighbor. Is your love for your neighbor guided by my love? Do you pray for your enemies? Do you wish well to those who have, in one way or another, caused you sorrow or offended you? Know that whatever good you do to any soul, I accept it as if you had done it to me. Application. O Jesus, my love, you know that it has only been for a short while that I have acted toward my neighbor, guided solely by your love. You alone know of my efforts to do this. It comes to me more easily now, but if you yourself did not enkindle that love in my soul, I would not be able to persevere in this. This is due to your Eucharistic love, which daily sets me afire. Second meditation. Now you shall consider my love in the Blessed Sacrament. Here I am entirely yours, soul, body, and divinity, as your bridegroom. You know what love demands. One thing only: reciprocity. Application. O my Jesus, you know that I desire to love you with a love that no soul has ever before loved you with. I would like the whole world to be transformed into love for you, my betrothed. You feed me with the honey and milk of your heart. From my earliest years, you reared me for yourself alone, so that I would know how to love you now. You know that I love you, because you alone know the depth of the sacrifice I offer you each day. Jesus said to me, "My daughter, have you any difficulties in this retreat?" I answered that I hadn't. In this retreat, my mind is like lightning. I penetrate all the mysteries of faith with great ease. My master and leader, all darkness disappears from my mind under the ray of your light. Today, for your spiritual reading, you will take the Gospel of St. John, chapter 21. Let it feed your heart more than your mind. A couple of weekends ago, the weather was absolutely beautiful here, and so everybody was outside. And I live in a very good little community, and it's kind of tucked away in the DC area. And a lot of my neighbors were outside. People were raking leaves, others were mowing the lawn, kids were playing and running around. And there was this one point where a whole bunch of us were outside just doing our thing, but every once in a while we'd kind of gravitate over to each other and start talking about this or that. My neighbor behind us would ask my husband for some help. He'd go over and help, and then he'd come back into our yard. And then our neighbor across the street came over and he gave us some fresh salmon from Alaska that he had recently caught. And that was super nice and it was so good. And we were all just talking and living life together. And later on that evening, our neighbor behind us invited us over for dinner, and we went over and he made the comment of, it was just really cool today. We were just kind of like in our own little community and we were all just doing our thing, but it was neat to see us like come together, then go do our own thing, then come together. And it's like, it really felt good to have that community. And I told him I thought the same thing and I completely agreed. It was just a very simple, special moment. It wasn't anything huge or big, but it just felt good. It felt good to be around neighbors and to just be living life together. Today, Christ is telling Sister Faustina to meditate on love of neighbor. And we know that when Christ says love of neighbor, he really means anybody that we come in contact with. But it really got me thinking about the neighbors that I've had in my life, and it just took me down a memory lane. And I thought back to all of the kids in my life that I played with when I was young. There was this one boy, and we lived in Manhattan, Kansas. Like, he would never knock on the door. We would just be in the living room, and all of a sudden, he would just be standing there. And we're like, "Oh, hey, Sean, what are you doing, buddy?" At least my parents said that. And I wonder where he is now. I mean, he's a grown man. He's as old as I am. What has he done with his life? I mean, he was just a kid when I knew him. And there were other kids in my life when I lived in, kind of a cul-de-sac area. We would all ride bikes together and, play hide and seek at night. And we're all just scattered now, like the four winds. And I have no clue where those kids are. And it was weird to think about that because for a brief period of time, we were sharing life together. And then, life goes on and time moves on and people move away and those relationships end. And it's just weird to think about. Then I was thinking about later as I got into my teen years and even into my adult years, I've had a lot of neighbors because as a military spouse, I think I've lived in 12 homes and moved 9 times in 20 years. So that's a lot. I've had a lot of neighbors. And I've had some great neighbors, and I've had some really bad neighbors, and they're all such complex people. And I think of each one of them and how they came into my life for that brief period of time. And maybe they made an impact, and maybe they didn't, but I do think of them. It's interesting how much we think about our neighbors, even if we didn't have like a really significant relationship with them. I wager that most of us still think about, that guy I used to live by, back in the day, or that crazy neighbor down the street, or whatever. I know that we all must think of that. And it just shows how connected we are as human beings and how integrated our lives are and how important we are to each other. And how our neighborhoods and our neighbors really make up a story for our lives. Because like I said, you always have like the crazy neighbor on the street, or the kind of reclusive neighbor on the street that nobody knows much about, but everybody's curious about. I swear, every street that I've lived on, I've had like a reclusive neighbor, and everybody's always super curious about who they are. And when we lived in Las Vegas, we lived off base when we first moved there, and we were in this, community, this kind of gated community, and it was very lonely because nobody ever came out of their house. And people would just drive up to their garage door, open the garage door, slide their car in, close the garage door, and go inside. And my family and I were kind of desperate for people. And so we would often take evening walks around the neighborhood after dinner in order to maybe catch somebody outside so that we could meet somebody. And it never happened. And it was so lonely, and we didn't feel a sense of community, that we decided to move on base the following year. And thankfully we found a better community there. But it just shows how important we are to each other. And because I've lived in a ton of communities, and I know that there are great neighbors and bad neighbors and neighbors all in between, it can sometimes be hard to live around certain people. It can be really hard, especially if they're the nosy neighbor or the intrusive neighbor or the grumpy neighbor. It can be hard to love these people well. And I invite you to just lean in to neighborhood life. I think we've gotten away with that because of social media and all of our electronics. We just sit in our house and stare at screens instead of getting out and living life. And I fear that generations younger than mine, I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm like the forgotten generation. But I fear that generations younger than mine are not going to have those neighbor stories, because they don't really get out of the house much. And they tend to just, insulate themselves with people that just think just like them, instead of just learning to live with all walks of life. And because of all of our electronics and all of our screens, generations, after me tend to not go out and get to know their neighbors very much. And we wonder why we have a loneliness problem. Because even if neighbors are difficult and hard to get along with, it's still nice to know that you're in a neighborhood and that you have neighbors. And it just gives you memories, right? So many memories I can recall that have to do with neighbors. And I fear that we've lost that. And so I really invite you to, go outside whenever you can and be present. I can't tell you how many people stop and talk to me just because I'm outside doing yard work or sitting outside with a book or playing with my son. People see me and they feel like it's okay to come and talk to me. And I've met a lot of people in my neighborhood that way. And so I really invite you to be more present, be out there, be attentive to neighbors, and just open your eyes to the people that live around you and be present to them as a Christian witness. Being kind to them, maybe taking them something for Christmas or, a special holiday or something, inviting them to a neighborhood barbecue. Just being present. I think we need more of that. And I think people will start to feel less lonely. And Christ has called us to love our neighbors and to pray for our enemies. And I know that sometimes our neighbors are not people that maybe we want to bring into our life, but surely we can just recognize that they're there and maybe they need our prayers. So that is all for today, Catholic Pilgrims. I will see you back here for day 354. And until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.